What is going on, YouTube gang? It's that boy Texas Yankee. And today we got some more NBA content to talk about in this recap. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go get into it. I'm gonna just ask y'all real quick, leave a like, comment, subscribe. You know what I'm saying? So I know y'all enjoy the content. Let's go. First thing we're going to talk about is Wembanyama's birthday game. And as a Spurs fan myself, you know what I'm saying? I got to rep the hometown San Antonio. This was a game that I did watch a good amount of, and it really looked winnable for the Spurs for a good stretch of it. We were down a little bit in the beginning, but near the end of the game, it really looked like we were about to pull it out. And, we end up losing by 4. Milwaukee ends up winning the fourth quarter by 4, which shows, we were tired going into that. And um, what I really take away from this is just how on both sides there's some big takeaways. Got to reword that real quick. Giannis Antetokounmpo had to drop 44 points in 14 and 7 and 2 and 1 to beat the Spurs by 4. And that's not great if you're a Bucks aficionado. You know what I mean? Dame Lillard drops 25. But outside of that, what kind of help do you really get? Not much. Chris Middleton leaves the game after halftime. That's kind of undisclosed, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Hopefully he is okay. But off the bench, you need someone like Bobby Portis to step up and kind of give you more points than he's doing. 5 is not going to cut it. Campaign, you're here to play offense, man. 3 shot attempts, and they're forcing the offense through Giannis and through Dame, essentially, is kind of the issue. And no one outside of that seems to be picking up the rest of the slack. Kind of a issue that the Lakers have as well. And obviously, this isn't the case all the time. They are 25-10. But this is a problem that's big enough that I think in the playoffs, it'll come back to bite them, as well as their defensive issues lately, which we talked about in the last recap. Give up 27 to Wembanyama. Obviously, it is a little bit hard to stop, but 34 for Devin Vassell and 18 and 6 for Trey Jones is what I really want to highlight. Keldon Johnson, not a good game shooting, but Trey Jones has come back into that starting role as a point guard and kind of, I do think, helped this Spurs offense look a little bit more cohesive. Sohan's moved back to the 4 spot, which maybe has improved his play a little bit, not necessarily this game. It's docked, but he's still, playmaking to a decent degree. The thing that I like is that they're finding Wembanyama a little bit more on his open looks, it seems, and he is taking more shots since Trey Jones has come in that role, I believe, scoring a few more points. What I really just wanted to touch on was, is Devin Vassell a good enough player to keep around Wembanyama if you are the San Antonio Spurs, and is that a piece that you think you can build around side Wembanyama with? I think it is. And he may be one of the only ones that we have on this team right now that I am confident that we should keep. Keldon Johnson in the past, I kind of felt like that, but he's just been very inconsistent, especially offensively over the course of his career. And while, beggars can't be choosers, I do think that in the long term, we need something a little bit different than what he brings to the table. So next I want to talk about the Lakers quick and kind of that skid that they've been on as of late. And it's been really disappointing after they started the season, kind of shakily as was maybe to be expected. They kind of find their stride, around the in-season tournament though. And after beating Indiana, we kind of see that as, okay, this team looks decent. Seems like they're out here and ready to kind of play, But that just hasn't been the case. And since that win against Indiana, you can see that was right up here. That was, look at this stretch. They were 14-10 at that point. Well, I guess you could say 14-9, right? And then you don't really count that in the regular season. But since then, they have not been very good. Only 3-9 in that stretch. So, what is the takeaway from that? A lot of it has to do, obviously, people have been talking about Jarvin Ham and his coaching, his rotations, and how he's kind of fit the players in together. And I kind of do have to agree, man. If you take a look at the player statistics, you can see the tail of the tape. These two guys are giving it, what they need to do. They're both putting up 25. 80's giving you 25 and damn near 13, three blocks. Like, come on, dog. LeBron James, in his old age, still doing what he's got to do. The thing that kind of irks is when you take a look at these players right here, right? So D'Angelo Russell maybe not doing quite enough, but that's kind of what his role is. And so the question is for the Lakers is what do they need to change, right? Part of it is the rotations and the coaching. A lot of it's the cohesiveness, man. And I mean, I think the job definitely is on the line pretty soon if things don't come around. This stretch they got coming up is maybe a little bit easier. They have Memphis, which is LA is going to be a tough one. They got Toronto, Phoenix, always in that game as well. But then they got Utah. Okay, so you're going to be tough. Dallas, Brooklyn, Portland, some winnable games. We'll see how they do over this next little stretch. And if they can't find their footing, by the end of the month, I think it's going to be a really big sign for what is to come. Um, so, yeah, we'll see what they'll do around the trade deadline and if they decide to actually make any moves. If not, I would definitely look for a coaching change to happen soon. Next, we're going to go ahead and touch on the MVP race real quick. And so Joel Embiid still has kind of solidified himself so far as the number one spot. He is playing out of his mind and has 35 points per game. You can't really argue with that. There's no one else doing what he's doing. So Nikola Jokic being at number two, he obviously has kind of showed that he doesn't care as much about the regular season necessarily as some of these other guys, which I don't think is by a necessity, like a bad thing, but it can maybe come out to bite him, especially in the voting. Giannis Antetokounmpo, again, having an MVP level season. The only thing is maybe the team success. If the Bucks continue to kind of be not quite as good as you would have expected, it will hurt them. But he is playing really well. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, in my opinion, should be above, but that's just me. Shea for me is probably number two at this point, and then Luka Doncic. Actually, Luka might be number two. My number one is Embiid. Then I think Shea and Luka are right there. Personally, I do think that Jokic might still be the better player out of them, but in terms of this season most valuable, that's just what I think. Anthony Edwards being at number 7 on here is pretty insane. It's a bonus. I don't know about that. Halliburton definitely deserves some talk, though. And if we check the basketball reference ladder as well, they have Dame Lillard on there for some reason. I guess it's because of the team win loss, supposedly. Um, but outside of that, I do really like to see Tyrese on there and kind of get a little bit of exposure. Tyrese Maxey, I do not think should be, however. But they kind of agree that Embiid, Jokic, and then here, yeah, they have Shea, Giannis, and Luka. So it's just kind of a look in at where it is right now. And I think if it continues like this, obviously Embiid's the front runner. That'll be an interesting conversation after what happened last year. So we'll see what happens. So next, we're going to take a look at the standings, and I got two things I kind of want to bring up while we're looking at them. So first of all is the playoff picture and what it would look like if it were to start today. So in the Eastern Conference, obviously we have these 6 teams here kind of being the top 6, and I don't think they're very solidified. I think anyone in the top 8 right now can really reshuffle for those top 6 spots, which is kind of the beauty of what the play-in adds as the Brooklyn Nets and Hawks are down there. You can kind of argue that they too are teams that might be able to make a little bit, maybe not the Nets so much, but the Hawks, like if they get hot, they can maybe do something in the first round against someone. But I guess the beauty of the play-in is more so for like the Western Conference is a better example. But in the Eastern Conference right now, your matchups The thing on it is obviously you don't know how the play in is going to go, but you have the 7-10, the 8-9. So the Knicks and Nets would play. I think the Knicks obviously sweep the floor there, and I think the Knicks are going to look a little bit better going forward. I think they could easily jump up into the top five, but I mean, that can be said for any of these top eight teams. Obviously, they're all within a half game. Um, we also want to talk about what the bottom teams are going to do going forward. So teams like the Pistons, Wizards, Hornets, teams like the Spurs, the Blazers. We don't really talk too much about the Grizzlies because they are in a weird predicament with how they started the season. Um, but yeah, so let's get into it. The Celtics right now would play one of the play-in teams, obviously, so that's kind of hard to determine who would end up coming out of there. But let's say the Cavs play the Hawks, the Cavs win, and the Knicks and Nets would play, and the Knicks get in. Um, so yeah, I don't think that's exactly how that works. But if they won outright, let's say the Celtics end up playing the Knicks in the first round right now. Obviously, I think the Celtics would win that, probably 5 games. Um, it's not looking great there. If you're the Knicks, you kind of still are maybe a year away. You do have some nice pieces, but I think you just kind of need that one extra one that you can maybe get out of free agency to get over the hump. The Cavaliers are kind of in a similar situation as the Knicks in terms of their current team, where I don't feel necessarily super strongly about them in the playoffs, but we'll have them matched up with the Bucks here. I think the Bucks would definitely take care of business. Um, and thing about the Cavs is they can be streaky, they can be flashy on some nights, and then other nights they just won't show up. Orlando Magic, a young team, they're kind of been on a skid after starting off really well. That home record is impressive, but unfortunately, being the 6th seed, you're playing the Sixers, and I do not think they would have an answer for Joel Embiid or anything like that. So unfortunately, they go down as well. So we kind of just see there. And then the 4-5 matchup would be a really entertaining one with the Miami Heat and the Indiana Pacers. Right now, I think that I might even lead towards the Pacers, but that would really be a great coaching battle between Eric Spoelstra, obviously, and what he can try to do to combat against the Indiana Pacers, just incredible offense, and if they could slow people down or not. They're giving up 125 points per game, though, which is insane. And then looking at the Western Conference right now, the Timberwolves remain the number 1 seed. We'll see if that stays. I kind of think the Thunder are creeping up on them, and then the Denver Nuggets as well. We're just a game behind. The Clippers have really been making noise as well lately. So I think those top teams right there at the top four. I think the top four are the top four, obviously. In the East, I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that. But in this conference right now, I think that's the case. The Sacramento Kings as well are playing really good basketball. The Pelicans have been surprising lately. And, that's something that maybe not all of us had really penciled in, is them kind of coming back together. The playing in the West is a little bit more interesting as you got Dallas and LA matchup and then Houston Phoenix. And those are some interesting games because you kind of got the younger teams in Houston and Dallas. Dallas kind of being a mixed match, I suppose. And then Phoenix and LA. Obviously, we know what's going on with those ones. But I'm not sure if today you got Dallas versus LA in the play-in. I don't know who wins that. Um, I'd like to say I like LA's personnel a little bit better, but Dallas does have that star lift of Luka, so we'll see. And then Houston and Phoenix, I think, would be really entertaining. Not necessarily because of the level of like flash or anything, but because of the defensive emphasis that the Houston Rockets would bring against the Suns, trio of guys. I think that would be fun to watch. But honestly, I might pick the Rockets at this point, which is insane. And then maybe even the Mavs, but maybe the Lakers. So you'd have the Timberwolves playing whoever won that. I think the Timberwolves are very good and they get they could probably take care of either of those teams in the playoffs. Dallas maybe being a little bit more of a challenge for them. However, I think they match up better with the Lakers. The OKC Thunder, whoever they're playing first round, they're probably fucking up. You know what I'm saying? It's unfortunate for them, but I think if they played the Houston Rockets or Phoenix Suns first round, they'd send them packing. So Denver Nuggets as well. If they end up playing the Pelicans, that would be a very interesting series. And then the Clippers and Kings would be a high scoring, just offensive shootout at this point, I think. So all these would be very interesting. And I do think that, in the West, obviously, it's like, okay, which one of these teams are, if any, are going to flip flop? At this point, I'm not feeling too great about the Lakers. I do think they'll make changes to kind of come back around. But the Rockets might be the one that fall out, if anything, just due to their kind of inexperience. And then in the East, obviously the Brooklyn Nets, I think, are my pick. But let's talk about the bottom feeders real quick. Detroit Pistons, I think we got to start with. Where do you go from here? If you're Detroit, that is a excellent question. And really what you got to do is reestablish the culture from the bottom up, I think. The losing is just like ingrained in that building. You have Cade Cunningham. Get him some help. You know what I mean? If that means you got to go out and make a trade to get some sort of talent to boost your team up, that might suck, but you might have to do that just to give some sort of semblance of an NBA franchise at this point. And I'm not trying to be too pessimistic, but the aura around this franchise right now just seems, obviously they're in one of the darkest spots you can be in. 3-31. That win the other night felt like a godsend to them. We'll see what the rest of the season holds, but it's any improvement. The Wizards, I think they just kind of need to hold on. Um, they do have a lot of draft capital coming up over the next few years, so maybe it's time to move on from Kyle Kuzma, see if you can get a few more picks from that. The Jordan Poole thing obviously isn't working out great, so cut your losses if you can, but you might have to keep them around for a little bit. But yeah, really just try to tank, develop the young guys. Washington is, again, been in kind of purgatory for a while, so sucks for them as well. And then Charlotte, um, with LaMelo injured, it's hard to really say much. They don't have enough outside of him to succeed, and that's kind of something that they need to address, and that's what they need to start with. And then in the Western Conference, the Spurs, I do think I've seen, for being a 5-win team, obviously, we're not great. But with what Devin Vassell has shown me, it does look like we have another guy besides Wemby. And I think Zach Collins is decent enough that we could keep him around. There's a couple players that I've liked. But really, it's just how do we keep developing that, and how do we build around Wembanyama in the future? How do we get players that fit with his play style that are at a high level or are going to be good role players for us? And then for the Portland Trailblazer, this one's a little bit stranger as well. I think you got to try to shop Jeremy Grant. Kind of the same thing with Kyle Kuzma. You got to look around for some kind of package that you can get some value from. He hasn't been great. Well, sorry, no. Jeremy Grant has been decent this year. He hasn't been great in certain stretches, but I think there's still a good amount of trade value for him there. So hopefully you go out and kind of find something and let those young guys develop. I think you will have to choose between Anthony Simon, Scoot Henderson, Shane Sharp at some point. One of them is probably going to be the odd man out. We'll see who that is. And yeah, I would like for them to try to find some better young front court players to build around in the future as well. So we'll see what they do there. But yeah, man. Warriors and Nuggets are about to go to overtime, but unfortunately it's already pretty late. So we'll see who ends up winning that game tomorrow. I'll see y'all next time, man. It's been your boy Texas Yank.